Hello, everyone. We are recording. Hi, everybody. This is a pre-recorded interview that we have going on. I'd like to welcome Mr. Kevin Wake to the show. Oh, I should introduce myself. My name is Stacey Nell. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, and we have our weekly Lunch and Learn today. Now to my guest, Kevin Wake. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm thrilled to have him on the show today. I want to introduce him. He is the president of let me get this right, the Uriel E. Owens Sickle Cell Disease Association of the Midwest. So today we're going to talk about sickle cell, the disease, treatment options, cures, advancements, your association. Definitely. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay. The first question I always ask, and I didn't put this on the agenda I sent to you, but it's the first question. What are you having for lunch?
I am pretty boring. I have a garden in Leavenworth on the farm that I grew up on, and we have zucchini that is going out our ears right now. So
Wow.
I sauteed some zucchini and brought with me, and I'm just gonna have zucchini for lunch and onions that we have in the garden sauteed together.
Okay. Yeah, that lunch is much more healthy than what I have planned. Homegrown zucchini and onions from the garden, simply saute. Yeah, I've got like a frozen dinner. I've got nothing exciting going on either. I was lucky to get here today. Okay, but well, thank you for coming on. I did want to read a little bit from the website about the foundation, right? So this is not about you. This is about Uriel E. Owens. After who died of sickle cell in October of 1980. His family members and close friends decided to establish a sickle cell organization in his honor. The Sickle Cell Disease Association of the Midwest, established in 1981, and this association continues to provide assistance to persons with sickle cell disease and to educate the community about the disease. Today, the association provides services like financial assistance and scholarships to students and families living with the disease, as well as working to educate the public about this disease. So, Mr. Wake, can you just tell us about your history? What's your personal connection to sickle cell?
Sure. I'm the president of the association, but first and foremost, I am a sickle cell disease patient as well. And so I feel like I have a very close connection to the work that we do and serve the sickle cell community simply because I'm living with the disease myself.
Mm-hmm. So
So
when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed at the age of 9 months.
9 months.
My parents had no idea that they were trait carriers. And I had an older brother, David, who suddenly passed away at the age of 2.5. And
Wow.
they discovered on his autopsy that he had sickle cell disease. I was 9 months old at the time. And 2 days after his autopsy, I was tested and I too had the disease. My parents were given genetic counseling and the advice that you've already beat the odds. You're not going to have any more children with the disease. So 2 years after that, my younger brother John was born, and he was diagnosed with sickle cell as well at birth.
Wow.
So I always say that my parents kind of beat the genetic odds, and all three of their children lived with sickle cell disease.
So your older brother who passed away at 2, it was from complications?
Yeah, he passed away from complications of the disease. He was always very colicky and sick and running fevers and catching colds. And my parents were just told, some babies have that. They're just prone to
Oh.
that. And so sickle cell at that time really wasn't widely talked about and known about. My mom was a nurse, and she had started hearing some things in the medical community about sickle cell, and she brought that up to the pediatrician, and he's like, "You don't have sickle cell. Your husband doesn't have sickle cell. Why would your child have sickle cell?" And that was a few months before he passed away. So, um, you know, a lot of families, I think, went through that kind of um, sadness and desperation because it really wasn't known about and talked about as much as it is today.
Yeah. Gosh, that's just such a tragic story. Okay, so but you were diagnosed young, and your younger brother was also diagnosed young. So can you tell us, for those of us who may not know exactly what the disease is, right? We may have heard of it.
Sure.
It's one of those things we hear about, but may not know exactly the details. What is it? What is the
Right.
disease?
Sickle cell disease is a genetic blood disorder. You are born with it, you can't catch it. It affects the red blood cells of your body. And a normal red blood cell is shaped like a donut. It's round, it's flexible, it flows easily through our bodies. Red blood cells also carry oxygen that we need throughout our bodies. If you have sickle cell, a portion of your red blood cells are shaped like a sickle, an old time farm tool, or a banana that I always say, that's easier to picture. Because of the shape of that red blood cell, it really can't carry the amount of oxygen that we need. So you have a lot of organ damage. It also won't flow nicely through your veins like a normal red blood cell would. And so because of that, they are rigid, they're sticky. Those cells get stuck and clump and cause little mini blood clots in your body. And your body's natural reaction to that is pain. And
Mm,
so patients with sickle cell can experience tremendous pain. That's kind of the hallmark symptom. That's what people typically think about when they think of sickle cell disease. However, there's many other complications wherever you have blood in your body, which is everywhere. You can have complications. You can have organ damage. I've had 3 strokes related to my sickle cell. Um, you can have blindness for having a crisis in the back of your eye. So there's a lot of other complications that people don't typically think of when you think of sickle cell. You just think of the pain,
hmm.
but it is a very complicated disease.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I was reading a little bit about your story about this idea or your history with pain episodes or when you had a stroke and how you couldn't quite communicate to the medical professionals. You knew what was going on, but you
Right.
couldn't communicate effectively. So, do you want to tell us about that episode?
Sure. I had my first stroke when I was living in Chicago, and my stroke affected not only my balance and my capability of being able to maneuver myself, but I lost my ability to speak. And so when I called 911, I could not respond to the first responders on the phone. Um, when they arrived, they saw me, they saw the symptoms I had. This was very early morning on a Saturday, and I was 32 at the time, and they immediately identified my case as a young black male that was either intoxicated or on drugs. Um,
Mm,
they
hmm.
never once thought that I could have another something going on. And that kind of treatment that sickle cell patients receive in ER settings is not uncommon. A lot of patients receive the understanding that they may be drug seeking when they go into an ER for a pain crisis, and they are telling doctors, what pain medicine works best for us. We know from very early on because we experience this so often exactly what medication works best. And when you have someone that may not have a great medical history with the institution, you go into an ER and you request pain medicine, and you know exactly what strength and dose works best for you, we get pegged often as drug seeking. Um, so there's a lot of disparities that we see in the healthcare system when it comes to sickle cell disease.
All right. So, I suppose you're working to raise awareness amongst medical professionals about.
Exactly, and that's a lot of what we do. We not only do education and work with the community, but we work to really educate the medical staff and the personnel. They don't receive a lot of medical training in
Mm,
medical school about sickle cell disease. My understanding is with sickle cell disease training in med school, it is less than a day of training, and because of that, we get the bias care in the ER settings. We also don't get the treatment standards that are recommended from the American Society of Hematology, executed on a regular basis. So we get substandard care, and then oftentimes we get substandard doses of medication to alleviate the pain that we have. The longer patients are in a crisis, there's more silent damage done to our body
hmm.
and to our organs, and that just kind of manifests over time. So
So you say, but
that's
there
a
is
concern.
there's like a best practice of care that you say that the American Association of Hematology
Yeah,
has that.
American
Yeah.
Society of Hematology has really worked great over the past several years to come up with a list of standard of care treatment regimens for patients with sickle cell disease, which includes, faster triage time in the ER. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced in the ER setting sometimes waiting 5 to 6 hours before being
Mm-hmm.
seen.
Mm-hmm.
And they're recommending now that patients with sickle cell disease be triaged immediately after any kind of immediate trauma patient. So, the faster patients treated, the faster they'll be relieved of their symptoms, the less organ damage they'll have as well.
Right. So now this disease is still fairly rare. Excuse me. It's not common at all. About what is the prevalence? We know if it's a genetic disease, both parents have to carry the trait. What is the
Exactly.
prevalence?
So it is a rare disease here in the United States. However, it is the world's largest genetic blood disorder known. Um,
Wow.
and so in the United States, it affects anywhere from 100,000 to 120,000 individuals. And that's a guesstimation. We do not have a registry nationwide to really know where all these patients are. So that is our best guess based on what data we do have. Um, and in the US, it primarily affects or impacts patients of color, African American. It's about one in every 365 births as of today. Um, and then Hispanic Americans are the second largest population in the US as well. Um, it is not a Black disease. That
Okay.
is also something that has, been a myth about sickle cell disease. If you look at the worldwide populations, it is in every race possible out there.
Oh,
But
see, that's good. I've heard that. I believe that myth. So thank you for setting me correct. I would have thought that this was something that was like a black disease, like you said.
Right, right. It is a disease. It's a genetic mutation. They believe that it is a natural mutation that occurred over time. It is most prevalent in the world in the sub-Saharan desert area, so Africa, South America, the region, the Mediterranean region as well. The reason that they suspect that it started there was if you are a trait carrier, not a disease patient, but if you carry the trait, you have less impact from the disease malaria. So they
Hmm.
think this was a natural mutation that occurred over time to protect patients or people from malaria. Then, with the African slave trade that took place, we saw a lot of African Americans coming over to the United States, and that's how they believe sickle cell was introduced to the US. And the first sickle cell patient was identified in the US in 1910.
1910. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, so I guess historically this is a pretty recently researched. Only like
Yes.
100 years that people have really been sort of paying attention to it.
Right. We've known about it for, over 100 years. We did not have our first approved treatment for sickle cell disease until 1998. So it took quite a while for us to even have one treatment that's FDA approved to actually treat the disease. And that is
Oh
because of
wow.
the lack of research and the lack
Right.
of education about the disease. And because in the US, it really primarily affects patients of color. So we see
Yeah.
a lot of national and state research dollars going more toward the diseases that are well known, like cancer and some of the other rare diseases, even get better research monies compared to sickle cell disease. It's only come to light here in the recent past that we're seeing sickle cell disease being researched, and there's a lot of advances that are taking place in our disease space now. But it's been a long time coming.
Wow. I was gonna say because yeah, if Uriel died in 1980, and you're saying that the first treatment was in 1989, that was like 19 years later.
Yeah.
Gosh. So what is the treatment nowadays? Like let's say, and I know I read that in 2006 it was passed that all newborns are screened for sickle cell now. So now people have a chance of finding out quickly. So
Right.
what is the prognosis? What is the treatment for if a child is born now with this?
If a child is born now with the disease, the future is bright for children with sickle cell disease. And I say that I'm 55 years old. I've lived a long life with the disease. I was told when I was in high school that I most likely would not live past 25. My brother
Wow.
was told the same thing. But we are seeing the lifespan, the average lifespan of patients with sickle cell now being 54. So that has raised, definitely over the years. We now have 4 FDA-approved treatments for the disease to help reduce the number of crises that we have. There are pain management techniques, including pain medicine, but also, alternative techniques with self-care and meditation and things to really help you be more proactive with your care versus reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because, reactive care in my mind is when you go to the ER for a crisis.
Yeah, too
Um,
late.
Proactive care is doing everything you can to prevent that crisis from happening. There are certain triggers that we as patients know are triggers for our disease. And if we can avoid those or modify our routine to lessen the impact, then we have a better chance of managing our disease
Right, because when I was
successfully.
reading, it talked about a low oxygen event, and I didn't know what a low oxygen event is.
Right. So if we, put our bodies into extreme conditions like exercising, going to the mountains where there's less oxygen available,
Mm-hmm.
that will cause our red blood cells, more of the normal red blood cells, to actually sickle in size. And so as that happens, your sickle cell percentage increases, your normal red blood cell percentage decreases, and that could put your body into a sickle cell crisis. And the goal is always to keep your sickled cell blood cells percentage low. Um,
Gotcha.
when I had my second stroke, they did an analysis of my blood. My sickle cell percentage at that time, when I had just had the stroke, was 82%. So I only had
Oh,
18% red blood cells that were normal to carry
wow.
the normal amount of oxygen. So, it's no wonder I had the stroke. I probably had a lot of other organ damage because of that as well.
So what's the treatment at that point? Is it blood transfusion or what? Like, is it? I guess my question is, once a cell has changed shape, does it ever return to normal?
No, it cannot reverse and come
Oh,
back
okay.
to normal size. A normal red blood cell lives about 120 days in our bodies. A sickle cell blood cell only lives 10 to 20 days. And so
Wow.
your body is constantly generating more blood cells. So that's why all patients are usually anemic. We tire and fatigue very easily. But there are ways to overcome the issues that we have as
Hmm.
patients, like you were talking about transfusions. That's a normal, a regular treatment regimen that patients have. I myself, I go in now for exchange blood transfusions where they take my blood out and put donated blood in my body. That is to mechanically keep my percentage down below 30% of sickle
Hmm.
cell blood. So I do that every 6 weeks. I've done that since 2017. And for every time I go in, I receive 7 units of blood.
Wow.
So that's a lot of blood, and I'm one patient. So, blood donations is a common treatment regimen for patients with sickle cell. So I'll do a little plug here that we all need to donate blood because we are saving lives, and it's not just those car crash victims or trauma victims. It's patients that are living their lives and trying to live with rare diseases and other conditions. So it's imperative, especially blood donations from people of color. You know, I think that is also something that we need to really talk about. And we don't see a lot of people of color donating blood, but
Hmm.
patients that are of color, like myself, when we receive blood donations, we have a better chance of taking that blood and being able to use it with less complications if we receive blood from donors of similar genetic makeup.
Wow. Okay. Well, I didn't plan on doing a commercial for blood donation, but we'll toss it in there, right? I mean, I guess I could do, when I put in the show notes, I try to put links to to your website, and I'll put links to other things, but I can definitely toss in a link. Let me make myself a note to toss in a link about blood donation, because I think that's definitely, there we go, something that we should all look into. Okay, so long-term treatment, you talked about transfusions every several weeks. What are some of the long-term treatment available?
you know, some of the other things, especially for younger patients, we are seeing great advances in bone marrow transplants could
Oh,
actually be a cure for patients. And then we've seen a surge over the past several years of the genetic research to, try to have other cure options available for patients that live with sickle cell. And we currently have two different techniques that are sitting at the FDA waiting for approval right now for gene therapy. So that, I would tell patients that are living with sickle cell, there's a cure that's on the horizon
wow.
that's very positive. My concern with the cures that we have sitting there or the ones that are being tested is, are they going to be accessible to all patients?
Mm,
And that is, and we're working very diligent to make sure that we have the capability of providing these treatments to all patients that qualify and would benefit from having gene therapy.
wow, that's fantastic. So definitely. Now, I wanted to highlight that in 2022, on the Missouri side, there was an awareness week. So, I mean, I don't know what's going on the Kansas side. Has anything happened on the Kansas side? I mean, like,
Well, I will say that a similar bill was introduced on the Kansas side this year. Unfortunately, it did not pass the Senate side, but we are hoping to reintroduce a bill that's very similar to the bill that was signed last year in Missouri. The bill in Missouri designates the third full week of September as Sickle Cell Awareness Week in the state of Missouri. September is also the National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. So, to have that extra week in there that's specific to the state, I think just adds additional awareness that we can do here in the state and make some really good strides in terms of education about sickle cell disease. It also mandates that the Missouri Health Net do annual reviews of all sickle cell treatments that are currently available, as well as emerging therapies, to make sure that sickle cell patients in Missouri can get the best care possible,
wow.
including education of providers.
Right.
That's key. So, there are great benefits on the Missouri side. I'm very hopeful that something similar to that will happen on the Kansas side, and that we can have a unique combination of the two states, especially here in Kansas City. We work on both sides of the state, so to have that you know connectivity between the two states, I think would be great. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to pass something.
Well, keep me posted, right? I mean, like, if there's any way I can help out testimony wise or helping just spread the word that this is coming through, and to try to get that bill across the finish line, that would be fantastic. So I'll keep me posted on that. I know that your organization has events coming up. And in the show notes, I will definitely put down the website. It's sicklecellmidwest.org. And you have some events coming up. Do you want to talk about any of those?
Sure, we always have events throughout the year, but we are always trying to do more, especially during Sickle Cell Awareness Month in September. So we always have a walk, an awareness walk, and it's time for our community to come together. That will be on Saturday, September 9th. And the information should be on the website, and registration is now open for that as well. We also are going to do, kind of as a closeout to the Sickle Cell Awareness Week in Missouri, a musical cantata, and that will have an educational component as well. But we have a great lineup of performers that are be performing there, including many of the performers here in Kansas City that performed last year in The Color Purple. And so
Ah,
we have a board member that also performed in that piece, and so she's worked with several of those her colleagues to do some musical performances there as well. So that'll be a great time to come together as a
fantastic.
community.
Okay, and so again, and I'll put that, but in the notes, but it's sicklecellmidwest.org. They have an events tab where all of their events are listed under that tab. Okay, I mean, this has been. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. This has been very informative. A disease, like I said, that I had heard about. My family, my mother's side is from Kansas City, Kansas, and they know the Owens family. And so I was saying before we started, I remember when Uriel Owens passed away from sickle cell. That was the first time it sort of crossed my awareness. So I was always aware of it, but never quite understood what the disease was. And now I'm glad to hear that there are treatment options and cures on the horizon. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. And I think it really has been a great testimony to the Owens family as well that our nonprofit has been in existence since 81, 42 years plus. And that's a testimony to how well liked Uriel was and with the impact he made and he's still making. So thank you very much.
Well, is there anything else you want to push? We've hit we've hit events, we've hit donate blood. Is there anything else you want to toss out there?
No, I think that is all. And so I do appreciate the time that you've taken to help us continue with our mission to educate the community about sickle cell disease, educate hopefully providers as well about the appropriate care for patients. I just want to leave with saying, and this is my own personal model that I always say, sickle cell is a diagnosis, but it's not a definition and should not define who you are and what you can do. And I really do hope that all patients living with sickle cell have that kind of motto because this is a disease now that's manageable and we can live with it. It's no longer a death sentence.
All right. Well, thank you. That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks, everyone, for joining me today on our Lunch and Learn. And we will be back next Monday with another one. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.